The story of Bully opens in a high school ruled by fear, where three notorious delinquents, led by a cruel student named Miles, roam the halls. These boys don't care about schoolwork. Their only mission is to torment weaker kids. Among their regular victims is Jimmy Mulligan, a heavy-set student who never fights back no matter how relentless Miles becomes. Jimmy isn't completely alone, though. He has two loyal friends, Andy and Bobby, always stand by him. Bobby, who is often mocked for being feminine, faces constant ridicule from Miles as well. Yet Jimmy is always there to comfort him, reminding him that Miles's cruelty doesn't define who they are. At home, Jimmy is surrounded by warmth. His parents love him dearly and worry constantly about his well-being. One morning on their way to school, Jimmy and his friends cross paths with Miles and his gang. Miles sneers and demands $100 from Jimmy, a ridiculous amount for a kid from a modest family. Jimmy insists he doesn't have that kind of money, but Miles doesn't care. His demand stands, pay or suffer. Later that day, Miles humiliates Bobby in front of their class, leaving him shaken. Jimmy consoles his friend and then invites both Bobby and Andy to the cafeteria, promising to treat them to lunch. They're stunned by Jimmy's enormous appetite, but unlike the bullies, they never make fun of him for it. Instead, they laugh and share food together. As they sit, Andy and Bobby tease Jimmy about Adrian, a kind-hearted girl they've noticed stealing shy glances at him during lunch. Their peace doesn't last. Miles barges into the cafeteria and plops down beside Jimmy, again demanding the $100. His presence quickly irritates another student, who bravely tells Miles to stop making trouble. Insulted that someone he considers weak dared to speak up, Miles unleashes a barrage of insults. But before things escalate, a much larger, stronger student stands up to confront him. For once, Miles's bravado crumbles. He cowers, then storms out, humiliated in front of the entire cafeteria. But after school, Miles hasn't forgotten. He corners Jimmy again, demanding the money. Jimmy, finding a spark of courage, pushes back. He reminds Miles that he doesn't owe him anything, and he won't hand over money he doesn't have. Enraged at this defiance, Miles beats Jimmy viciously on the roadside. The assault only stops when an elderly man appears, warning Miles that he'll call the police if he doesn't leave immediately. Miles panics and flees, leaving Jimmy bloodied on the pavement. The old man helps Jimmy up and takes him to his home, where he tends to his wounds. The man introduces himself as Mr. Action. While recovering in his house, Jimmy notices photographs and trophies on the wall. To his amazement, he learns that Mr. Action was once a world heavyweight boxing champion. Inspired, Jimmy begs the old fighter to train him, desperate to learn how to defend himself and put an end to Miles's bullying. Mr. Action hesitates. He admits he's too old now to personally train someone for the ring, but he sees the fire in Jimmy's eyes and respects his courage. He agrees to help, promising to reach out to some of his old friends who can coach Jimmy properly. Afterward, Mr. Action drives Jimmy home and explains what happened to his parents. They're horrified by the beating, but deeply grateful to Mr. Action for caring for their son. Jimmy, though bruised and sore, feels something new stirring inside him: hope. For the first time, he believes he might actually be able to fight back. Jimmy's parents wasted no time. They gave him their blessing to train under Mr. Action's guidance. They even accompanied him to a local boxing gym owned by Manny, an old friend of Mr. Action. After listening to Mr. Action explain Jimmy's struggles with Miles, Manny agreed to train the boy, but with one condition. Jimmy had to promise he would take it seriously and never give up, because boxing was not for the weak of heart. Jimmy accepted. From that day on, Jimmy trained regularly under Manny's watchful eye, with Mr. Action always present to observe his progress. Sweat poured down Jimmy's face with every punch and every round on the bag, but his determination was stronger than the pain. Between training sessions, Jimmy opened up about how Miles had been extorting him for $100. Mr. Action came up with a clever plan. He advised Jimmy to double the amount to $200, but asked for a month's time. By then, Jimmy would be strong enough to stand up to Miles, and the bully would never get a single dime. Jimmy followed his advice. The very next day, when Miles cornered him for the money again, Jimmy boldly told him it would be $200, but he needed a month. Miles paused, surprised at the nerve, but the greed of a bigger payday won over. He smirked and agreed to the deal. For the first time in a long time, Jimmy felt relief. At least for a while, Miles wouldn't harass him, but the grind of boxing training soon took its toll. One afternoon, Jimmy seemed sluggish and unmotivated. He told Manny he was simply exhausted, but Manny, a seasoned professional, knew better. He could see Jimmy wasn't physically drained. It was his spirit that was faltering. Manny pulled Mr. Action aside, telling him that Jimmy's heart didn't seem in it anymore. On the way home, Mr. Action confronted Jimmy about his lack of energy. Jimmy admitted the truth. He was losing faith. Despite all the training, he still felt weak, still felt like he couldn't stand up to Miles. His confidence was crumbling. Mr. Action listened, then placed a hand on his shoulder. He told Jimmy that no effort was ever wasted, and that win or lose, the lessons he was learning would stay with him forever. His words were meant to remind Jimmy that growth wasn't measured only by victories, but by persistence. Later that night, Jimmy's father noticed the dim look in his son's eyes. He didn't force Jimmy to keep training. He told him the choice was his. But before leaving, he shared something that struck Jimmy deeply. He said he dreamed of a day when Jimmy could teach his own children how to defend themselves, so they would never have to endure the humiliation and pain that he had. Those words lit a fire in Jimmy's heart. He realized quitting wasn't an option, not anymore. The next morning, he was back on his feet, ready to fight, ready to prove himself. The following day, Miles and his gang cornered Jimmy and his friends again. This time, they targeted Bobby, mercilessly beating him in front of a crowd. Bobby broke down in tears afterward, convinced they were powerless against Miles. But Jimmy, with newfound resolve, stood by him and said firmly that he had a way to stop Miles once and for all. That evening, Jimmy didn't wait for Mr. Action to pick him up. Fueled by determination, he rode his bike the long distance to Manny's gym on his own. His arrival shocked both Manny and Mr. Action. Jimmy's eyes burned with passion. He was no longer the boy who doubted himself. He was ready to fight. So focused was he that during a sparring drill, Jimmy accidentally landed a clean punch on Manny, sending the coach tumbling to the ground. For a moment, the gym went silent. But instead of anger, Manny broke into a grin. He was thrilled. Jimmy was finally serious, finally fighting like someone who wanted to win. Day by day, Jimmy threw himself into training with relentless determination and fiery passion. Manny pushed him harder, adding heavier physical drills, sparring sessions, and even elements of mixed martial arts to sharpen his skills. Meanwhile, Mr. Action focused on Jimmy's mind, feeding his spirit with advice, stories, and words that instilled resilience. At school, Jimmy confided in Andy about his training and his plan to finally stand up to Miles. Around the same time, Adrian began spending more time with him. Their connection grew naturally, and one night at a friend's party, after sharing a heartfelt conversation about their lives and dreams, they both realized how much they understood each other. From that moment, they decided to date. But the peace never lasted long. While Jimmy and Adrian enjoyed the party, Eddie, one of Miles's lackeys, tried to ruin the night by hurling insults. The old Jimmy would have stayed quiet, but this was a new Jimmy, confident and unafraid. He stood up, confronted Eddie, and physically threw him out. Weeks rolled by, and the promised day finally arrived, the day Jimmy had vowed to face Miles. That morning, he woke with a fire burning inside him. No more fear, no more submission. He was ready. At school, Miles wasted no time. He cornered Jimmy, threatening to hurt his friends if Jimmy tried to run or back out. Later, in the restroom, Jimmy encountered a fellow student named Vinny, who had heard of the brewing feud. Vinny also knew Jimmy had been training under Manny. With a firm handshake, he encouraged Jimmy and wished him luck. But Eddie, hiding in one of the stalls, overheard everything. He rushed to report to Miles, who, realizing Jimmy had been training, panicked. Desperate to keep his advantage, Miles arranged for a notorious street fighter named Glassjaw Billy to fight in his place. Word of the showdown spread like wildfire. By lunchtime, the entire school seemed to buzz with anticipation. Everyone wanted to see who would finally come out on top, Miles the bully or Jimmy the underdog. Confident and ready, Jimmy walked toward Miles and his crew. Miles smirked, sure that with Billy by his side, victory was guaranteed. But Vinny had a surprise of his own. He sent his own boys to intercept and kidnap Glassjaw Billy, leaving Miles with no choice but to fight Jimmy himself. The crowd circled as the fight began. At first, Miles's fists found their mark, and Jimmy struggled to match his speed. But the training kicked in. He steadied his stance, absorbed the blows, and countered. Slowly but surely, he began to turn the tide. Then, with a burst of strength and precision, Jimmy unleashed a powerful combination, a barrage of punches that landed squarely on Miles's face. Enraged and desperate, Miles's friends rushed in to gang up on Jimmy. But Andy and Bobby charged to his side, fighting back with all they had. Together, the three of them held their ground, beating back the gang until Miles and his crew collapsed in defeat. Breathing hard but victorious, Jimmy stood over Miles. He didn't gloat or taunt. Instead, he looked him in the eye and said firmly, "Stop bullying everyone. It ends here." Miles sneered, unwilling to change, but the message was clear. Among the crowd, Mr. Action watched quietly, pride shining in his eyes. The fight quickly went viral. Dozens of students had recorded it on their phones and uploaded it online. Within hours, Jimmy's victory against his bullies exploded across social media and even made it onto the local news. The community applauded his courage. His parents, beaming with pride, finally saw their son stand tall, unafraid, and unbreakable. The film closes with Jimmy, Andy, Bobby, and Adrian walking down the school hallway. Heads turn, whispers spread. They are no longer the bullied, the overlooked, the weak. They are confident, respected, and admired. The students who finally stood up and took down a gang of tormentors who had ruled the school for too long.